Welcome back to the Dignitea, where we look at today's tea and infuse it with a little bit of dignity. I'm your host, Madeleine Jones, and I am here with
David. Hi.
David. Ha. We are drinking some coconut tea that I don't remember the name of it, but it's like Bigelow toasted coconut.
Yeah, it's
Fun
good.
fact, back in my contempt days, I had this tea and I wrote on the box, please don't drink my tea. I can tell. And
Your roommates?
yeah, I wrote on all of them, which I've discovered is always going to be something that irks me about having roommates. Or
Yeah.
not irks, but just I'm like,
Buy your own stuff, please.
hi.
Yeah.
Hi there, friend. All right, so today we are going to be talking about a bill about basically public unions. What's the name of this bill called? Hold on.
Um,
Do names of bills matter? Sometimes the names are like safe, getting rid of railway safety systems.
yeah. What
Public
is
sector labor union amendments. Super exciting name. But basically, this bill has become controversial because it is banning collective bargaining for people who are union members in the public sector. Is that a
right?
good? Did you
Yeah.
say that's fair?
Yeah.
All right. So there's been a lot of discourse about this. And of course, there's been a lot of contemptuous discourse and dignified discourse. This is something a lot of people care about. And even if you're not a union member, I've noticed that it's kind of a topic of conversation for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it's like firefighters, teachers, anyone who works for the public is
Yeah. People who work
basically
at the state hospital.
people who work at the state, like
Yeah.
anyone who would be affected by having a government job is affected by this bill. That's a lie. All right. So let's take a look at some of the responses to this bill. Do we want to look at dignity or contempt first? Do we want to start
Let's
light? Do we want to
let's start
start
with
dark?
contempt.
Let's start with
Let's
contempt and we'll end with some dignity.
yeah.
All right, let's talk about people who used contempt and they were against the bill. Okay. Um, this was a union worker, professional firefighters of Utah. He said it's almost a personal attack on us. And this is actually a really hard one for me to say is contempt because I like to me like a firefighter union worker is such a sympathetic thing that when they say it feels like a personal attack, I'm immediately like, what's going on here?
I mean, I think that
Who do I need to call?
that like line is specifically what we've talked about of why people respond with contempt, of their feeling like this is a personal attack, um, and so they feel justified to respond with contempt because their personal livelihood, their
This is their day to
coworkers
day.
are being attacked. Um, so yeah, definitely frames you're the bad people.
Yeah. Now, this same person, though, said it's a horrible bill. It takes a lot of rights away. It's a horrible bill, is a separate quote, by the way. It takes a lot of our rights away as far as being able to do collective bargaining and being able to come in and have our voice and do what's right for the people. I think that's a pretty, like, fair explanation
Yeah,
of why they don't like the bill. Prefacing it with a horrible bill.
I mean, I think I think that can be on the dignity side of the index of facts, decisions, outcomes. Like these are the outcomes of this bill, and this person is explaining that of what the impacts are going to be. But I think this next quote, uh, when will people learn that Republicans are not a friend of the unions no matter what they say?
You can't trust these people. They're against us.
Yeah. And the dignity index isn't a fact checker or go back and look at bills, what they've passed, but it definitely doesn't invite Republicans to the conversation for people who are more pro union.
Yeah. So when I was looking at this, the guy who introduced it, he was like, we don't want to take away like union workers. It's not about this. This is about basically protecting taxpayer dollars. Now, from my time working up at the Hill, I have realized that there's always some sort of nuance behind these bills. Like they probably did this because something happened where it exceeded taxpayer dollars where they felt it was appropriate.
Yeah.
Now that's not to say that like I am not supporting or going against this bill. That is not what I'm doing here. But there's always more to the picture. And I think whenever you tell the story like there isn't, that's what really keeps the contempt culture going.
Yeah.
No matter what they say, I just feel like it's like such a we can't trust them. And I feel like if I were on the receiving end of that, I'd be like, well, no matter what I do, people hate me. So might as
Yeah.
well go with my gut and not listen to people, which is horrible for a representative
Yeah.
government.
Which, yeah, isn't going to, spark a, a better dialogue or compromise for a bill like this, in
Definitely.
in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, I found a couple of comments that I didn't think necessarily fit into like contempt for, contempt against, or dignity for, or
Yeah.
dignity against. It was just like general contempt. And I felt like this is the response to an overall dignity culture where someone's like, old man screams at cloud, or it's like, what are you even talking about? These are some of my favorites. So, union workers for Trump, morons. This was interesting because no one was wearing a shirt that indicated that. This was just like a random comment.
Yeah.
And I think this goes for a lot of the distaste and contempt that people have, where it's just like, I'm going to assume that these were union workers for Trump, and now they're getting like a leopard's ate my face moment. I don't know if that's like a Reddit, like,
I have
you
seen
get
that on
what you
Reddit.
pay
Yeah.
for kind of thing.
Yeah, I saw this comment on Reddit too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then this was an interesting one too. I know some of the guys in this photo and on their crew, and they definitely didn't vote Republican. And maybe I'm reading this wrong, but when I read this, I felt like it was like, guys, don't worry. They didn't vote, they voted right, and they don't deserve this. Where it kind of felt like the other person is like, they get it in their face. Like this
Yeah.
is the same thing, maybe just a little bit lighter. I don't know. It feels like contempt, but this is like the four. They leveled it up for
Yeah.
us.
A four. We're better than those people who did vote Republican.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think this is sad because it looks like people are supportive of these union workers and they are against the bill, but this sort of stuff just creates noise so that it's a distraction from the union bill. So suddenly we're talking about union workers for Trump when that has nothing to do with this bill other
Yeah.
than the name union,
Right.
or trying to test to see if these people voted Republican, which honestly shouldn't matter for like such a small bill. Like that's such a general thing to be like, we needed the entire
Yeah.
Democrats,
Right.
particularly in this state where it's a Republican majority legislator.
Yeah.
All right, contempt for. Did you see this one?
Um, I did not see that one.
Let's see. I had a really hard time finding people who were contemptuous and for the bill. I think that's just because
That's
the
interesting.
likelihood that it's going to be
Yeah.
passed is you're not going to say what you want. But I did find a little something here. Utah is a right to work state, and I believe it should stay that way. I had to be part of the union in the state, and I worked in, and for over a year, I am still not receiving it by retirement I am entitled to. Unions are only middlemen taking your money and the rights of the company and doing a poor job at it. Now, I felt like this was like dignified, except for that last bit. They're only taking your money and the rights of the companies and doing a poor job at it.
Yeah.
But part of me is also like, is this dignity? It's like that tiny line where I'm like, when can you say someone's not doing a good job?
Yeah. I mean, I think talking about maybe a little more specific, and this is only part of the text, so maybe they do, but just being more specific about where they're doing a poor job at managing it. But yeah, I think,
I do want to give kudos for the vulnerability though. Like
yeah,
this is a YouTube comment and someone's like, this is my experience. And
yeah,
so I feel like a lot of times we talk about improving the ratio of dignity and contempt, but sometimes I'm like, sometimes you got to like get your thought out there, and the habit of contempt is so strong that sometimes it can come out as like contemptuous. Like it really is a skill to be able to phrase things in a dignified way.
I think, yeah, that's interesting you say that. I think a lot of these um, bills bring up a lot, and uh, it's, a reaction, and we jump into this like response, especially if it feels like a personal attack of like, I have to defend myself and my dignity and my coworkers' dignity and this institution's dignity. I am just going to fire something off. And
And it's just a YouTube comment too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that too. But I mean, it's, yeah, that's part of all of the comments are part of the culture of contempt.
It's all part of
But
that noise.
but it is hard in the comments section of like, are you actually going to have a constructive dialogue? Like maybe a couple people read it and be like, oh, that's, you can change my mind, or like I see where you're coming from, based off of that comment. So I mean, yeah, it can get through.
Yeah. Should we talk about the
Yeah,
dignity?
let's jump over to the dignity side for this.
Let's talk about Dignity 4. So, this is from the Senate president. We came up with a good substitute, and I'm trying to figure out if there's support for that or not. I think this is like a pretty good baseline happy dignity.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like, look, we tried to come to a compromise, and we're waiting to see if this is a good compromise on it.
if people, yeah, if people are
People
gonna
like
like
it.
it or not. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's like a
What's
classic
like
6.
6?
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, is I want to read into it and say it's a 7 because I'm like, are they like being like, look, we might be wrong about this.
I mean,
There's too
if
much reading into it. It is a 6,
yeah, I
I
was gonna
think.
say if there was more context or a longer quote of I'm open to discussing disagreements, but more of like we're seeing if there's common ground or shared values or interests anywhere in here.
Yeah, for sure. All right, this is another one. Colomore's proposed substitute to soften the bill, but said they were uncomfortable with the full ban because of how strongly their constituents opposed it. I think this is the journalist. We usually don't do that because this is kind of just explaining like what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's my bad.
I mean,
Speed, copy, and paste.
I think that's still, a good highlight of Senator Cullimore, who's the bill sponsor, and saying they're open to discussion as well. Um, yeah, because they're open to talking and discussing, but I feel like tends to retreat when they find areas of strong disagreement.
That was an interesting comment, as he said, this is getting a lot of like, it's taking a lot of energy,
Yeah,
which I personally was like,
people are passionate about it.
yeah, and if people are passionate about it. Another senator stood on the floor and he was like, people are unhappy. I don't know why we're trying to rush this through. And I was like, I feel like that's probably a dignified comment. I don't remember what the full thing was, but to be like,
Sure.
why are we in a rush here?
Yeah,
Is I don't know.
trying to have a better conversation with constituents' concerns. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. This is another one where someone's explaining what they know and they're for the bill. Air traffic controllers have a union. They can't negotiate pay. It's not unusual for public employees to have unions, but not be able to strike and negotiate pay. I feel like this is like a 5 where they're just
that's
speaking.
yeah. I'm like they speak openly uh, about their views, but not with contempt. And I think they're providing information and content that somebody can read that and be like, okay, this has happened in the past, and it's, this might be the angle that the senators who are introducing this bill are coming from. I like that.
I like that too because like I probably would not look up what the support for the bill is, but when I was looking through the comments, it was like this is a good thing to know whether you like or you don't like the
Yeah,
bill. It's like,
right.
oh, okay, it's like a good reference point.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about dignity against. So if they oppose this bill, How are they advocating against it in a dignified way? You want to read the
Yeah,
first one?
yeah. The function of a union is for workers to collectively leverage their labor to bargain with the wealthy executives for their share of the profit. I mean,
5.
I, I could see it being a little bit of a dig, um, with wealthy executives, but it's not saying, we're better than those people or we don't trust them. It's just like we're it's about profit sharing. And this is the function of a union. I do think, uh, yeah, I would say it's a good 5.
Yeah. I feel like it's just like, this is what a union is for.
Yeah,
And it's hard because it feels like, maybe there's some context here where you could explain how the bill might take away that power, but
right.
you can't clarify everything, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
in one quote, it's hard. Yeah,
Exactly. A union without collective bargaining is just a support group. It's like saying you can have money, but you can't exchange it for goods and services.
I think this is another helping paint the picture without contempt, or just like comparing, uh, different different ways to explain it. I like that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times we put analogies in the contempt bucket, but I think
Yeah,
they can be in the dignity bucket too.
yeah, for sure. Just like really trying to paint what you're trying to say differently without othering somebody else. I think this, um, comment might be a great a great response, a dignified response in reaching out and saying something that you're concerned about.
Yeah.
This Reddit comment.
Yes, this was my favorite one. Is someone just
Yeah,
posted basically a letter to the representative or a script to the representative if you were against this bill, and they described why they don't like it. So it's saying, I believe public workers should have the ability to collective bargain as a constituent. Collective bargaining is a cornerstone of a healthy, equitable workforce. I mean, it's really just advocating for the bill. It's not contemptuous. I think this is productive. And I
yeah,
honestly think that if you were to just take these pieces and comment it, collective bargaining is a cornerstone of a healthy, equitable workplace. It allows employees, especially those in essential professions like teaching, to negotiate fair wages, benefits, and working conditions that ultimately benefit the entire community. Removing these rights weakens the voices of dedicated professionals who work tirelessly to educate our children and to serve the public.
yeah,
And so, like, you could have that as just a comment, like, as you're like shouting into the ether, like, this is what I believe.
yeah. I mean, I think that is like a great basis for this conversation of like, or the senator isn't going to say, oh, they're just some XYZ, put them in a box. I'm not going to engage with them. But this really is voicing concerns, real concerns, without demonizing your senator or other people who support this bill.
Yeah, I like it. Everyone, it's like everyone at the table.
Yeah,
I
right.
like it. Well, I know there were a couple substitutes, and one of them was about like making sure the unions vote to
Oh,
keep the
yeah.
collective bargaining in there. So basically, it would turn it on the unions
Like every 5 years, they need 50%.
of people to vote
Yeah,
for the collective bargaining,
yeah,
right? Which is kind of interesting. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I guess
Anyways, it's still up in the air. It's
we'll
up to
see what
the,
happens.
yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
But this is kind of like a short segment where I don't know, it makes me happy to see like people posting these letters to your senators or
yeah. I think I feel like I've seen a lot of comments about people calling their representatives and, saying, just yelling at the other person on the end of the line. It's like most of the time they're college
is like a
students,
19-year-old.
interns. Like, are they going to actually pass that information along to their senator? But I think using letters like this, I want you to know that I strongly oppose this. and will actively work to support candidates and policies that protect these rights and workers, like that is going to get through of like I'm losing constituents on in this Senate position. Um, my constituent isn't happy with this. I'm going to listen. Whether or not that impacts how they vote, it's like that gets through
Yeah.
um, past the noise, like you were talking about.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like staffer filters up to the top. And so the more constructive you are, the more likely you are to have your voice heard.
Yeah.
The more contemptuous and destructive you are, the less likely you will, and the more likely that it's just some poor, like, 19-year-old who's just taking all the verbal abuse.
I mean, you worked in the legislature, and one of my friends worked in DC, and he's like, yeah, we would get crazy people calling all the time, and do those calls actually go anywhere if you're not trying to have a more constructive conversation? It's okay to be mad, it's okay to be passionate, uh, but is it
Is it okay to
going
be
anywhere?
abusive? No.
No. But yeah, let's.
Even for good cause.
Yeah.
I'm sympathetic, but don't do it.
I mean, if you want your cause to move forward, uh, abuse or contempt will backfire. So it might work
Definitely.
short term, it might get people riled up, it might get to act, but in the long term, for conversations or mobilizing or whatever, contempt in the long term is going to backfire.
I agree. That's
Yeah.
right. Anything you thought about that you didn't think about before? Perspectives we missed? Let us know in the comments down below.
Yeah. Have a good week. Thanks for tuning in.
Totals.